Hit it.
Well, hello there friends, and welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel. In this video, I will show you how to make the Feel the Heat knit mittens. This mitten pattern is inspired by the very mittens that Senator Bernie Sanders wore to the 2021 inauguration of Joe Biden. These mittens have taken on a life of their own online. I'm sure you've seen the memes. They are plenty, and they're really funny out there. I mean, check out this one. Whenever anything goes viral in the regular old world that refers back to knitting, knitters really get a kick out of it. So over the last couple days, I've had a lot of Marley's minions reaching out to me to ask if I would design a free knit pattern and a free crochet pattern that is inspired by the Bernie Sanders mittens. I thought to myself, well, Marley, you are a knitter, you are a crocheter, you do design, and you teach on YouTube, so why not put it all together and do it? So quite literally, everybody, I picked up my car keys and drove to Michael's yesterday, got myself some yarn, cast on some stitches last night, wrote a pattern, and I'm here today to teach you how to work up that pattern. This is the free knit mitten pattern for the Feel the Heat mittens. I worked up these mittens using Peyton's classic wool in a worsted weight. I chose 4 different colors that are very neutral and similar to the colors of Bernie's mittens. And you can see here, I don't have the thumb yet completed, but that's okay. I'll have it done before it's time for you to get to that part. Now, the classic wool is a 100% wool yarn, which I thought was important because Bernie's mittens are actually made out of wool as well. They are recycled wool sweaters. There's a full story about the mittens, and I have linked to it along with the free pattern in the video description box right down there below. And while you're down there getting that link, go ahead and smash that like button to let everybody know you're enjoying this video. Okay, so I used Peyton's classic wool. You can use any worsted weight yarn you want as long as you get gauge. For this video today, I will actually be using Chic Sheep yarn by Marley Bird. It comes in 24 beautiful colors. I decided to use some very vibrant colors for the sample in the video, so that way you can see that you really can use any colors you want to make this fun pair of mittens. Along with the yarn, you need some needles. For this pattern, I chose to use size 6 or 4mm double pointed needles for the ribbing, and then I transferred to size 7 or 4.5mm double pointed needles for the body. How to use 2 circular needles. There's another set of circulars in this little case right here. If you want to do that, I'll do a brief overview. All of these needles I am using today are by Signature Needle Arts. Along with the needles, you need stitch markers, some scrap yarn to hold those gusset stitches, and a tapestry needle. The very last thing is that free pattern, and as I mentioned before, it is available over at marleybird.com. I've put a link in the video description box right down there below. Now that we've talked about the materials, we know where to get that pattern, why don't we go ahead and dive in, get started on these very cute knit mittens. Depending on the size mittens you are making, you need to cast on 36 stitches, 40 stitches, or 46 stitches. I like to use what I call the no-cuss cast on to get stitches onto my double pointed needles. It is just a way of casting on with the long tail cast on in such a way that I don't have to redistribute the stitches when I cast them all onto one needle. I get them all onto the 4 needles that I need them as I'm actually casting them on. There's a full video for the no-cuss cast on right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel if you'd like to learn it. Otherwise, go ahead and cast on the number of stitches you need for the size you're making with your preferred cast on method to work in the round. Once you get all of your stitches cast on, go ahead and begin to work in the round in the 1x1 ribbing pattern. You will begin with a knit, just like you would any other project that begins with a knit stitch. Make sure when you go to purl, you bring your yarn between your needles and you purl that next stitch. Bring your yarn between the needles and knit the next stitch. Between the needles, purl the next stitch. You will continue doing this all the way down your first double pointed needles if you're using double points, or down your first needle if you're using 2 circulars or magic loop. When you get to the end, go ahead and rotate your work just like so and continue on in the pattern. Make sure if you end with a purl, you begin with a knit. If you end with a knit, you begin with a purl. All of these knits and purls are going to be combined to create a very beautiful ribbed cuff. Once your cuff is long enough for you, make sure you have ended on the last stitch of the round. You can check that by finding your tail if you used the long tail cast on, and make sure that it is right below that last stitch you completed. It is now time to move away from the 1x1 ribbing and work into stockinette stitch and follow along with the chart. We're also going to be changing into our size 7 knitting needles and moving away from our size 6. Now we aren't going to like slip all the stitches over to this one. We will knit directly onto these needles. First thing you can do is go ahead and cut your color A. Make sure you leave a nice long tail so we can weave that in later on. You don't want it to be too short and not be able to weave that in. Once you have cut your color A, go ahead and grab your color B, and we will begin working following along with the chart and transitioning over to our larger needle with our color B. You're just going to use your color B, and you are just knitting on the entire chart with the exception of when we do the gusset increases. So this is really simple to work this transition. You will simply knit down the stitches that you've already created on here, and no longer will you be working those knit 1, purl 1. You're simply going to knit. And instead of using the size 6 double pointed needle, you simply pick up the size 7 and knit directly onto that. It makes a much more clean transition versus moving the stitches onto a larger needle before you knit them. Once you get all of the stitches onto the new larger needle, you will notice first off that all of your stitches are now with your color B. So color B is on your needles. This first stitch might get a little bit big because it's not really holding anything. The yarn isn't holding onto anything, but don't worry about that. We can weave those tails in later and tighten up those stitches. So I'm not going to stress about that. I'm now going to go ahead and carry on working in pattern with my color B through round 4. It's on round 5 that I will begin the thumb gusset. Once you've reached round 4, it's time to take a look at our chart because it's changing up a little bit. And from this point forward, you're really going to pay attention to your chart a lot more. I am working on the adult medium women's size, so I'm going to pull that chart over right now. And as you can see right here, I have some post-it notes resting on my chart. I like to block off all of the stitches above the row I'm getting ready to work. So we've worked rounds 1 through 4, and we're getting to work round 5. And so we're reading the chart from right to left, and this chart right here represents the full mitten as if it were laid out flat. So as you go from stitch 1 to stitch 36 for this size, once you reach the end of the round, you would come back over here and start at round number 2 and then read across. And then round 3, round 4, round 5, so on and so forth. In the instructions, you'll also notice where it talks about the no stitch, and that is apparent right here on stitch number 4 and 5 of the chart. No stitch simply means that this part of the chart is actually right over here. These 2 stitches that would normally be right there, stitch 4 and stitch 5, are represented right here. So this is round 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's round 5. And this is where our chart begins to create some gusset stitches for our thumb. Now the gusset of the thumb is to allow for this extra space right here for the thumb on your hand. So we create more stitches here to get a nice number of stitches here that we can then create a thumb. We are going to continuously build these thumb stitches between some markers that are going to be out here until we reach the number of stitches that we need in the thumb for the size you're making. This might sound a little bit difficult to start, but it really isn't too bad. Let's go ahead and jump in with round 5, and then we'll carry on with round 6 and 7 and get you going from there. Okay, round 5 has us begin with a knit 3. So I will knit 3 stitches, and then I'm going to take a marker and I'm going to place it directly onto my knitting needle. It's at this point I am supposed to work an increase, and I can either do a knit front and back into that stitch, or I can work a make one with this strand right there between this stitch here and that stitch there. So I'm going to work the make one, and I'm going to take my right hand needle and going from front to back, I'm going to scoop up that strand and I'm going to place it directly onto my left hand needle. Now I'm going to knit that strand through the back leg, and that's going to twist it so that way I don't get a hole. That's my make one. I will knit 2 stitches and I'll do another make one. So I'm going to pick up the strand, I will knit it through the back leg and finish it. Now I place another marker. So I have 4 stitches between my marker now. Originally I had 2, and those would have been our 2 no stitch on the main chart, but those are the first 2 stitches of the thumb, and then this is the make one, and that is our second make one. Now I can continue on working the chart as written, and conveniently for this round we're still using just one color and continuing on with our stockinette in the round. Okay, we are on round 6, and we're going to read this round just as we would any other round on this chart. You can see here we're going to use color B for the first stitch, but we will use color C for the second stitch, color B for the third stitch, and then we have our no stitch. But we know we're supposed to look over here and see what color we're supposed to make those 4 stitches between our markers. Then you pop back over here, we're back to color C, and then so on and so forth. You will follow this all the way down for round 6, and then you'll carry on to round 7, which will have another increase in the gusset, but you'll be following along with the same method of counting the colors across the round. So this time we're going to have 2 colors happening. I'm going to hold 1 color in each hand. That's the preferred method, and I want to show you how to do that now. Okay, the first stitch is with color B, and then we are going to introduce our color C. So I will simply just wrap my color C around my needle and knit with it. Then I go back to my color B. I slip my marker, and remember I'm going to read my chart as it is presented in the thumb gusset area. So I can see this first stitch here is also with color B, and the next stitch I am going to use my color C. So make sure you're using the working yarn, not the tail, and work with color C. Color B again, and then color C. Notice I'm holding 1 yarn in my left hand and 1 yarn in my right hand. Slip my marker and I go back to the pattern, or the chart itself, the major chart. So I will go back to color C, and then I have 3 stitches that are with color B, and then 1 stitch with color C. As I am working these stitches, I need to make sure that my float that's going behind those 3 stitches is not super tight. If it is super tight, it's going to pucker your work. So you want to make sure it's nice and loose. When you get to the end of the work, simply transition to the next needle, just like you did before. I shouldn't say the end of the work, but the end of the needle, and then carry on. As you're moving from one needle to the next, speaking of those floats, it's very important that the float that you're carrying across one needle to the next is not too tight because it can really make that area pucker between your needles. This is one of the reasons people like to use two circulars or magic loop when they're doing Fair Isle, because it just seems to make the transition easier because you don't have a bunch of break points as you do when you're working double points. So I'm going to work this round using the double points, and then I'm going to transition to two circulars just to show you how it works. And that way I can also show you how to do the next increase in the gusset, at the same time showing you how to work this color pattern with two circulars. Okay, I can see that I'm beginning with 3 of my color C's to begin with, and then I'm going directly into my make one and then working my pattern across my gusset stitches and another make one. And then I go back to my color C. So as I do that, I would normally just be going back to my double points, right? But I'm going to transition over to circular needles. That way you can see how this would work. So just as when we did our transition from the smaller double points to the larger ones, I'm going to just hold my circular needle in my hand and treat it as if it was the other double point. And I'm going to follow along with the pattern. So I'm supposed to knit the first 3 stitches with my color C. Then I slip my marker and I'm supposed to make one. So this is where I'm telling you that it doesn't really matter what color you make that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick it up like so, and I'm actually going to make it with the other color. So my color I haven't used yet, just so that I can transition it over without having a super long float before I have to use it again. Okay, so I've done my make one with my color B. And I can see in the pattern, I'm supposed to use my color C on the next stitch, B on the next, so on and so forth, over to the end here. This is my next make one. And I can decide here, do I want to make one here with my green, my color B, or do I want to make one with my sunset, my color C? You know what? I'm going to make one with the green again. Nope, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to make one with the color C. Yeah, that just helps me keep that little one by, like you see how it's one orange, one green, one orange, so on and so forth. Slip my marker, follow along with the pattern. So the next 2 stitches are with my color C, and then one green, one color B, and then I carry on. So this would be 3 stitches with my color C. And so when I get to the end of that needle, I'm just going to set it aside, and I will carry on working the next needle still onto my circular. Okay, so I have one more of my color C there, so I have my 3, and then I'll get my green. So what I want to do here is I'm going to get 2 needles worth, or half the number of stitches of the mitten on one needle, and then I'm going to put half the number of stitches or of the mitten on another needle. So I'm going to introduce 2 circulars. Okay, so that is half the number of stitches. Now I would rotate just like before. This is just as if I'm going to the next needle, and I will carry on with the pattern. But now I'm going to carry on onto another set of circulars. Now, could you use magic loop? Absolutely. But I'm going to show you why I like using 2 circulars. So I'm going to show you why right here. This first stitch here is supposed to be with my color C right here. And if I pull my color C really tight, it makes that stitch the same size as my cord. And it's going to make it nearly impossible to use. So one thing that I like to do is before I transfer all these stitches off, I will keep that first stitch on that second needle there. So that way, when I go to knit it over here onto the new double point or the new circular, it doesn't allow that stitch to get tighter than the actual needle itself. Can you see that? And so that's one way I'm able to combat having my stitches get too tight around the cord when I'm working with circulars in the round. And so I would carry on here, and then once I get a couple stitches in, that's where I would move this back down to the cord, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. I just let it do what it's gonna do. Oops, I did the wrong color. So I'm gonna go there. It should be like this. All right, so I'm at the end, and all of my stitches now are on 2 circular needles. So I have one set of needles right here, and they are on 1/2 of my mitten. And I have another set of needles right here that are on the other half of my mitten. Can you see that? Can you see they're on both halves? I will always only use this set of needles on this half. So at the corresponding needle, I will only ever use that on this half. And I will only ever use the corresponding needle of this one on this half. And by having those stitches divided up on 2 circulars, it makes for less join points, which makes it less likely to get a run. And as I showed you, it's easier to make sure that the transition from one needle to the next is a lot easier. The number of stitches you have between these markers for your thumb gusset is going to get up to either 12, 14, or 16, depending on the size you're making. What I need you to do right now is go ahead and continue on working the pattern as indicated, making sure you work those gusset stitches just like they're shown on the chart, and the actual body of the mitten as it's shown on the chart. Once we get to the thumb, I'll show you how to place those stitches from the gusset onto a scrap yarn, so that way you can carry on and work the body of the mitten. Believe it or not, you're getting through the hardest part right here. After this, it is smooth sailing. So don't give up yet. Let's continue on. Now that wasn't so bad, was it? Getting through those gusset stitches isn't too difficult. And the best part is that now we get to move those stitches out of the way and get back to our original stitch count. The first thing we're going to do is follow along with our charts. And for me, as I mentioned, I'm working on the adult medium. So I have fewer stitches that I needed to work up for my thumb gusset than the larger sizes. So you might be up further than this, but it's the same premise. I am on round 15, and I will go ahead and knit across using my color A for 3 stitches. Then I'm going to place all of these stitches here from my thumb gusset. Okay, so all of my stitches from my thumb gusset are going to go on a holder. I will cast on 2 stitches with my color A, and then I'll carry on working in my pattern. Now I'm using color A to cast on because that's the color that I'm working with in my round. On the other 2 sizes, you will actually cast on with your color B. I do believe that's where you are going to cast on. So I'm using color A, you will be using color B for the larger sizes. So let's go ahead and get this done. Okay, so I am starting on my first round after I've reached the number of stitches I need in the gusset, which I have to knit 3, and then I will remove the marker. You'll do the same thing no matter what round you are on. And it's at this point I'm going to place all of the stitches that were between my markers. So all of my gusset stitches are going to go on some scrap yarn. So I've just threaded some scrap yarn onto a tapestry needle, and I will just thread each of these onto the scrap yarn. And I do that by inserting my knitting needle as if to purl, and then just pulling them off of the needle. And what I do here, once I get those off, I pull the yarn through, remove this marker, and then here is a big tip. Because I often am known to accidentally pull this string out, I will usually tie both ends of my scrap yarn into a knot, just loosely right down here at the bottom, and then snip away any of the extra tail that I don't need here. So that way this won't go anywhere if I accidentally pull this or something. I don't want those to fall off, right? Okay, so now that those are on a holder, we get to move them out of the way. And what's going to happen is essentially I need to start working over here to these stitches that are no longer like in the way, right? So these are out of the way. I need to come over here to these. But remember, we started all of these gusset stitches with 2 stitches down here. So we need to put those back into action. So we can just use the backwards E cast on. And that's as simple as taking, like grasping your yarn just like this and taking your thumb and scooping it around and up. Then taking this needle and just placing that directly on, around and up, and scoop that on. So now I have cast on 2 stitches. I go ahead and continue on working in my pattern. And for me, on this round, I am just using my color A, and I will continue on all the way around. So this will complete my round 15. Pretty cool stuff. After you have finished that round, your work looks a little something like this. Your gusset thumb stitches are right over here, just hanging out on some holders. And then you are back to your original stitch count that you had for the start of your mitten. Really great, right? The color work should be looking really fantastic at this point. As you know, on the mittens themselves, they have this really nice sort of chevron look down here. And then there's a nice plain area here that we can actually work some different sizing customization into the mitten if we want to do that. The good news is from this point forward, the only 2 things that you really need to learn are the knit 2 together and the Kitchener stitch, and then placing all of those stitches from the thumb back onto your double pointed needles. It's not too much. What I do want to share with you is right here on this chart. I want to show you how you can really customize the top portion of your mitten to fit your needs. One thing I want you to notice is once you get past this sort of chevron color work area, there is a large section here that is done with just color B, and then there's this little cross bit that's done with color C. In this section here where color B is, if you wanted to make your mittens from this thumb portion up to your finger longer or shorter, it is in this area and this area that you would want to add an extra round or an extra row. And you would do that in multiples of 2, meaning you would put an extra round over here and an extra round up here. So whether you want to add an extra round after round 17, or maybe you delete round 17, or you come up here and if you've deleted 17 here, on this size, you would delete 25. If you added, you would add an extra round right here, so this would increase all of this up 1. Does that make sense? If you're someone who needs even more of a visual of how this works, adding or subtracting rounds to make your mitten longer or shorter, take a look at all of the charts I've already created for this pattern. Essentially, that's what I've done to create the different sizes as far as the length of each pattern. If you take a look at the adult medium women, you can see that right here on stitch 36, in this section where I'm using color B, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 rounds with color B here on stitch number 36. But if we go over here to the adult large women's, if we go to stitch 36 and we come up, there are actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds created before we hit that white right there. So I've added 2 rounds down here, and you will find that there are 2 more rounds up here, thus making this mitten a little bit longer than this mitten from this area up to the tip of the fingers. So if you're one of those people that really wants to customize your mitten and you're afraid to do it using the Fair Isle pattern, working those extra rounds or subtracting those extra rounds in this area of the pattern is your best bet to make the pattern fit and still maintain the look of the Fair Isle. Pretty cool, right? Now, here is a little tip for all of you out there that you are getting just because you've watched this video. I didn't write it in the pattern. I haven't mentioned it anywhere else, but I'm going to give you a quick tip. Are you ready? All right, pay attention. As you're working this section right here, you get in a really good rhythm of just working all of these rounds with one color. And it becomes daunting to go back and have to change to two colors again, just to get this little cross in this sea of color B. So what I suggest is work color B all the way through this entire section. And then when the mitten is complete, go back and work duplicate stitch over those stitches with color C to create those nice little cross looking details. That makes this section go a lot faster. It also makes it easier to customize. If you're uncertain whether you need this many rows for your pattern or you think you might need fewer or more, you could work up the number of stitches you think you might need in one color, and it's easier to rip out one color or add a couple of extra rounds of that same color and then go back and then center this after the fact with duplicate stitch. It just makes it really easy, and it's my little tip from me to you. Okay, we're ready to move on. Let's go ahead and continue on with our established stockinette stitch pattern for the rest of the chart for the size you're making. Once you reach the end of your chart, you will very easily be able to put that mitten on your hand, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm nearly done. It's at that point we will work some very simple decreases and then work what is called the Kitchener stitch at the top of the mitten to seam up the mitten. Past that, the only thing left is to knit a thumb, which is very, very easy, and you'll have it done in no time. So go ahead, pause this video, get your mitten to where you need it to be, come back here, and we will finish things up. Welcome back, friends. I hope you had a good time working up your mitten and you are pleased with it so far. I have reached the top of my chart, and let's take a look. As you can see, I used my little tip of not working those stitches in color C. I will go back and work duplicate stitch at a later date, but I have reached the top of my chart and I'm ready to move on to the top of the mitten. Now for these mittens, I chose to do one big round of rapid decreases, and then we finish up with a final knit round and then Kitchener it together. I decided not to go with the shaping as far as like the toe of a sock or even rounds and rounds and rounds of shaping like the top of a hat. I thought that finishing this all off at the top with a rapid decrease where it didn't hinder the colors and all the color changes was the right decision. So that's why I did it the way I'm going to show you. So let's go ahead, and I am back to my double pointed needles. As you can tell, I'm going to use them here in a minute to work the thumb. So I just thought it would be easy just to show you on here with them. But I'm going to work knit two togethers all the way around my mitten. So I am quite literally just going into two stitches and knitting them together. Once you have knit all of the stitches of that round with the knit two together, you have one final round of just plain knitting. And this is just to kind of get the stitches in a nice, comfortable situation to where you will be able to work a Kitchener stitch, which is just grafting the stitches together. It's super easy, nothing to be afraid of, and I will show you how to do it very easily. Once you finish that last round, we now need to place half of the stitches onto one needle. So simply just slip stitches over from like needle 1 onto needle 4, and then the stitches that would be on needles 2 and 3, place those on one needle. Okay, so you're just going to slip them all onto one needle. Once all the stitches are divided onto two needles evenly, go ahead and cut your yarn, leaving a nice long tail that we can use to graft these two halves of the mitten together. The first thing you want to do is position the mitten so the yarn is coming off the needle away from you, okay? And we're going to grab a tapestry needle here, and I'm going to thread this tail directly onto the tapestry needle. I will hold my knitting needles together in this manner. And with the yarn coming off the needle in the back, I'm going to start here in the front, and I will go into this first stitch as if to purl, and I'm going to leave it on the needle. Then I'm going to come back here, and with the yarn going underneath the needle here, I'm going to go into this back stitch as if to knit and pull that yarn through, but leave that stitch on the needle. Now I'm going to come back here to the front needle, and we're going to repeat this action. We're going to go into this front needle as if to knit, and we will take that stitch off and go into the next stitch on the front as if to purl and leave it on. Now we'll go under this needle to the back. We're going to go into this first stitch as if to purl, and we're going to take it off. So on the back needle, go in as if to purl, take it off, and then go in as if to knit on that next stitch on the back needle and leave it on. Okay, we're going to repeat this process. Go to the front needle, we will knit and take it off, purl, leave it on. Purl, take it off on the back needle, knit, leave it on. This is how the top of the mitten will look. I have a little bit of an ear here. If you want to learn how to get rid of the ear, you actually can watch a video that I've done right here on the YouTube channel. But the last thing to do is to take the needle and weave your tail to the inside of the mitten. I'm just pulling it through right now. Maybe. So I've just pulled it through because I'm not weaving it in yet because I have other tails I've got to weave in. But you can see the top of the mitten. You see how it looks like it's nice and grafted together? It's a nice, really beautiful join right there, okay? I like that nice, really blunt square finish there. I thought it looked really great with the look of the Bernie Sanders mittens without completely copying his pattern totally. So it gives some creative freedoms here. The next thing you'd have to do is now create the thumb. You know what? Wait a second. Let me take a minute and congratulate you for getting this far with this mitten. This is a fun project, but it is something that takes a little bit of time and a little bit of patience and a little bit of understanding to do. So if you have gotten this far on your mitten, congratulations to you. There's just one little step more, and honestly, once I get your needles back in those stitches, you're gonna be good to go. So why don't we go ahead and let's get this thumb complete. All right, so we have these stitches sitting here on this holder, right? So the first thing I'm gonna do is just evenly divide up these stitches onto 3 needles, okay? Now I have these nice long double pointed needles, and I also have shorter double pointed needles. Typically I would use shorter ones for a thumb like this because the long ones really get in the way. But I have the shorter ones on another project right now that I will be pulling in. So I'm going to use the longer ones at this time. And you'll see here, I'm just taking the needle and I'm going into each of the stitches as if to knit, and I'm just popping it right on the needle. Now at this point you can take out this string if it's in your way, or you could leave it in place. Totally up to you. I'm just going to cut it because remember I tied a knot so that it would hold in place, and then just pull it out. That is super easy. It's that easy. Okay, so the instructions indicate that the top of the thumb is made using color B. So I'm going to grab my color B, and this is what I do to start. The first thing I do, you guys, is I will tuck the tail through that thumb hole of color B and just pull it through. See how it's down here? It just gives me a little something just to pull on, and I make sure the tail is nice and long, okay? So here's what we're gonna do. Maneuver the stitches so that way they are in the round, okay? So see, they're in the round for me, but I have these 2 stitches right here that we cast on. Remember, we cast on 2 stitches right there. And so we are going to pick up and knit 2 stitches right here. So in essence, just put your needle in to where you did those cast-ons. Just stick it in there. Wrap your color B around your needle and pull it through. So that was one. I'm going to go into this next one, wrap it, and pull it through. If it is not like really pretty, maybe you look like you're getting a hole or it looks a little bit unsightly, I'm going to tell you not to stress about it because we left this really nice long tail here that we can use to go back and we've closed any hole that we happen to accidentally create. Now that we have those 2 stitches, we can begin to start working in the round here. This will be the start of our round, and we just carry on. I mean, you guys, this is so easy. We are back to working in the round. We just have these few stitches, right? Just these few little stitches here. So again, using shorter DPNs is preferred here because these long ones really get in the way, but the short ones are great. And the great thing about signature needles is they have many different lengths of DPNs, so you can really stock up with whatever length works best for you. You will see here, I am basically knitting in the round. I'm not doing any color changes. I'm not doing any increases. I'm just knitting in rounds and rounds and rounds of stockinette, just like we have done all along, only this time we're doing it on our thumb stitches, and we will do it until our thumb measures the distance written in the pattern or to your desired length, okay? We finish off the thumb very similarly to how we finished off the top of the mitten, except instead of doing a Kitchener stitch, we're going to pull it closed like a drawstring, really simply. All right, so I'm coming around here to this top. Now that I am up here, I'm going to go down to just 3 active needles instead of 4. And so you knit directly into those 2 stitches. And you can see here, like I'm already beginning to build some fabric there, okay? Now, when we started this video, do you remember when I showed you my almost finished Bernie Sanders mittens, the Feel the Heat mittens? I just had the thumb left to do. Well, I left it that way on purpose, so that way I could show you how to finish it at this point in the video. I know, don't be jealous of my perfect planning. Let's go ahead and bring in the other mitten, and you will also see that it has the shorter double pointed needles that I've been telling you were in another project, and here they are. So right here, this is the mitten that we have already seen at the start of the video. I put all of the stitches that were on a holder on these double points, and I have worked until this thumb measures the distance I want. So I'm at the point now that it's time for me to finish off my thumb. And so what we are going to do is work a round of knit 2 togethers. See what I mean? I told you it's just like we did on the top. So I am going to work a round of knit 2 togethers. Let me see if I can get into 2 stitches. And I want to make sure these are nice and snug. I want them nice and pulled tight so that way they look really good at the top of this thumb. And I want to show you a really great way to pull the top of this thumb together that makes the finish really beautiful, in my opinion. And I do this on just about anything that I'm going to finish with pulling yarn through. I think it's just a beautiful way to do it. So I'm almost done with knit 2 togethers. I have 2 more. Notice they're nice and snug. All right, so those are my knit 2 togethers. I've reached the end. I am not going to knit another round. I end right there. I will leave myself a nice long tail so that way I can pull it through this these live stitches, and I can also use it to close up any holes that might have gotten made while doing this thumb. I don't have any holes. It looks really good. I will thread this tail directly onto the tapestry needle, and here's the trick, y'all. It's so simple, but it's important. Most people, when they go to pull yarn through stitches that are on the needle, they'll go in as if to purl. I want you to take each one of these stitches off the needle as if to knit. So go into each one individually as if to knit. And as you do that, it's going to twist that stitch just a little bit, and it just makes it look really good. So pull that yarn through, go in as if to knit, as if to knit, as if to knit. Pull that yarn through. You guys see how the shorter needles here, these are the 5-inch double points. They just work better when you're working on something like this. Fewer stitches. All right, this is where it's like magic to me. Okay, you guys ready? I'm gonna put my hand on the inside so you can see. Okay. Can you see the top of that thumb? Okay. I'm gonna pull it together. Can you see how pretty that is? It's like a little like rosette. I hope you can see it. It's so pretty. It's such a pretty finish. It's such a pretty finish. And when I do this, I will take my knitting, or not my knitting, my tapestry needle, and I'll go through all of those stitches one more time. And then I will take my needle and poke it right down the center and then weave it to the inside. So it's going to come through just one more time. But once everything is woven in, you can feel free to cut your tail. I have all of my other ends already woven in on the inside of my mitten. So when I take this back out, this mitten is complete. And if you're wondering, this is the adult large men size, because I made this for my dad. But that there, you guys, is the Feel the Heat mitten, which is inspired by the Bernie Sanders Inauguration Day mittens. And there you have it, the Bernie Sanders inspired mittens. Feel the heat. I really hope you enjoyed making these as much as I did. I cannot wait to make the mate of this one. And when I do, I'll be sure to share with you on social media. I'm over on Instagram as The Marley Bird, or I am on Facebook under Marley Bird, or in the Marley's Minions Facebook group. If you make these mittens, be sure to share with me. Use hashtag Marley Bird or hashtag MMMDI, which means Marley made me do it. If you enjoyed this video and this pattern, be sure to hit subscribe, come back here for more videos just like this one, and check out marleybird.com. I have a lot of free patterns over there for both knitters and crocheters. I'll be talking to you again real soon. Until then, everybody, bye.